introducing yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Connor. I'm a VN1, so I just started my second semester, so I'm relatively new at this and still getting the hang of things. My primary interest is small animal surgery and emergency medicine. So I'm in the club or both of those clubs and on the executive board, and I'm also working as a surgery tech at a hospital in Des Moines. Um, I didn't have a typical path to vet school. I actually graduated and was working with military and police canines, and then got a part-time job working in a clinic and just fell in love with it. So pretty quickly started taking the prereqs for vet school, and here I am about a year later. So yeah, I think that's all I have for now.
Great, thanks, Connor. Katherine, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Katherine Eflin. I am a second year this year at Iowa State. I had a pretty traditional route. Getting here, went 4 years of undergrad in animal sciences at Purdue University. I'm originally from Ohio, and then came right here after. So my primary interests, I'm really interested in public health and emergency medicine. I have a couple jobs at the school, so if you have any questions about jobs or anything like that, feel free to ask. But yeah, that's all I have for now.
Perfect, thank you. Kate, you're up next.
Hey everyone, my name is Kate. I'm a third year DVM MPH student. So that's a dual degree program with the Masters of Public Health. I'm initially from Southern California, did my undergrad at the University of Arizona, kind of had also a non-traditional interrupted path. And at the time, the University of Arizona did not have a vet school, so I knew that I was going out of state. So for those of you out of staters, questions about that, that was like the only option I had. I also have a couple of jobs on campus, but I'm also involved in quite a few organizations, both at the school and nationally. I'm the president-elect of the Pride Student Veterinary Medical Association. I'm the One Health / Veterinary Public Health section student liaison for the American Public Health Association. I work with student government at Iowa State, and I do a couple of other things like with the Graduate Professional Senate. So all around, if you're looking to get involved in things that may not necessarily just be like vet clubs and also jobs, and my career goals at this point are to become an anatomic pathologist.
Fantastic, thank you. Dakota, last but not least.
I'm Dakota Tilleris. I'm a fourth year veterinary student. I followed a pretty traditional route. I did my undergrad at the University of Minnesota Crookston. So those of you that don't know where that tiny little town is, it's about an hour and a half north of Fargo, North Dakota. And I am tracking mixed, but I accepted a small animal GP job. So I'll be starting that in June. And I didn't have any jobs during vet school. Oh, actually, take that back. I did have one job during vet school that was very, very minimal hours. So any questions, feel free to ask, but I think that's all I've got.
Fantastic, thank you. So one question that came up right away, and a lot of you touched on it, was, so how do you manage kind of having a job and vet school, studying and all of that? How do you kind of maintain a balance there? Anybody can take that.
Yeah, so definitely, it's very cliche, but time management is huge. So I also have a 2-year-old, so my time is very limited. So every second I have to make sure that I'm being productive. And then a big thing for me too was just managing my expectations. So in undergrad, I studied, for 20 hours every weekend, but that's not possible anymore. So I can't expect to get a 4.0, and I've come to terms with that. So that's a big thing too, just managing your expectations and don't expect too much out of yourself.
Great, thanks, Connor. Katherine, I think you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I would, my big suggestion is starting out slow. I do have a couple jobs at this point. All of them are kind of minimal hours, but I think it's just like figuring out what you can do during vet school. So I started out as, I'm a Purina representative at the school. It's only a couple hours a week. It was just like to kind of dip my toe in the water, see if that was something that I could do, in addition to like being involved in clubs and then obviously classes and everything. And then my other 2 jobs, I work in a lab at the school, working on surveillance of antibiotic resistant pathogens, and then also at the ICU. So I think another thing that helps is that the jobs, for me, something that helps is that the jobs are kind of pretty applicable to what we're learning and kind of solidify some of the things we're learning in class. So it almost feels like getting paid for studying a little bit, and just getting some hands-on experience. So I think that's a big thing too, is like have it be something that you enjoy, because it is kind of a lot of my free time is being like in my jobs and my position. So if it's something that you really like to do, I think that's a big part of it. If you don't enjoy working during vet school, that might be a little harder. And I have plenty of friends that don't. Like, you don't have to feel like you have to work. It's not a ton of hours. It's not like it's bringing in a ton of money, but I just like kind of like having something to do. And I think it keeps me more on schedule too. If I have something to go out and do, especially during COVID when a lot of classes are online, it's nice to get to the school and stuff. So.
Perfect. Kate, do you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, I was just going to add that there are some people who will work at the school, and then there are some people who will have like part-time jobs in the community. One of the biggest perks for me personally, and why I choose to work at the school rather than in the community, is during actual semesters, you can only work up to 20 hours a week, but then during breaks, if they have the hours available, and most do, they can give you up to 40. So it's not necessarily like a guaranteed income, but there's a lot more flexibility in that. And I kind of just like having the security. This semester, actually, I ended up saying I want to work less because it's the last semester before rotations. And I was shadowing a lab that I was really interested in the topic. And then one day they're like, well, you're here often enough. Would you like to be hired? So the other thing too is that's not like the only story I've heard of that happening, but if you're really interested in a particular department, I've heard of people shadowing canine rehab and then they get hired in rehab, or ICU, and the same thing. So I do think there's pros and cons to working at the school versus also in the community. It's really up to you. I have a friend in my class who's a bartender. They love that they can work on the weekends. They don't have to work during the week really, because it's not when it's as busy. Obviously with COVID that changed, but pre-COVID and most normal time frames, that was really important for them, that they could push it off to the weekend. So it just kind of has to align with what your goals are too.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we've got a couple of questions that are about housing. So can you talk a little bit about housing? And if you live off campus, what is a typical commute time? They want to know, especially about in the winter.
Yeah, so I can go first. Again, I'm very untraditional in this sense. Most of my classmates, there's actually a trailer park that's 500 yards away from the school, so that's where a lot of my classmates live. But I do live more off campus. I bought a house here. Like I said, I do have a wife and a kid, so I'm in a little bit different position. But it takes me 9 minutes to get to the school, so it's not too bad at all. And there's a parking lot right next to your classes, so.
Yes, I'm one of the people that live in the trailer park. That was a huge push for me. The other school I got into, the cost of living, even just in Ames in general, was a big deal. But being from like Pacific Southwest, winter was not a thing. So I was really terrified that I was not gonna be able to handle that. And so I intentionally wanted to live close to the school. One of my best friends though lives 10 minutes away, and they're perfectly fine. They've grown up in the Midwest their whole lives. So it just is going to depend on what you're looking for. There's pros and cons to the trailer park. A lot of us live here though. But they're not all great trailers. I live in a pretty bad one. So just know that if that's something you're interested in, you need to really do your research before committing to something like that.
Great. Oh, Dakota, go ahead, jump in.
I have lived in the trailer park all 4 years in 2 different trailers. Like Kate said, there's a variety here in Old Orchard. There's Creekside is right next door as well. And a lot of my classmates may live over there and still walk. It's walkable. And those are a little bit nicer, some more double wides, framed homes, that kind of stuff as well, not just single wides or double wide trailers like an Old Orchard. They've been doing some small upgrades slowly to Old Orchard this last about 6 months or so. But for, like Kate said, cost of living wise, I'll be honest, I spend about $400 a month in my rent, and that's about it. Granted, I don't own a trailer like Kate. So you can always roommate. This trailer that I'm in currently is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. And so there's 3 to 4 of us in here, depending on when one of the boyfriends is over. So it's pretty a pretty nice community. It's quiet. It's not crazy. There's not many undergrads that live in here, so it's very easily studyable as well.
And I know one of the questions was like, how can you save money? And having roommates is a huge way to save money, whether you're in a house or not. So if you know people or if you're looking for people, there are always plugs for in search of a roommate, whether that's in a house or a trailer. So if that's something that you're looking to do and you're willing to, there are ample opportunities. I personally live alone, but I know plenty of people who have roommates.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just pulling up the housing site. So we do try and connect students with houses that are for rent, for sale, people looking for roommates and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm putting that, I know it says class of 2022, but I promise it's up to date. But that link is in the chat for you too. So fantastic. Thank you. So let's see, I want to touch on these questions that were asked right after the introduction. So for Katherine and Kate, can you talk a little bit more about public health? So what opportunities are there to get involved? What does that MPH look like? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, so I actually am currently getting my MPH through the University of Minnesota, their dual program. I chose that program specifically because you start the summer before vet school and I wanted to get some credits out of the way, and it's kind of just like a pretty flexible schedule, and that was my main motivation for choosing that program. University of Iowa also has a great program, and I'd say Kate can talk a lot more about this, but my advisor, Dr. Bickett-Weddle, is the advisor for that, and it's really nice for the students to have an advisor here working that instead of figuring it out all by yourself. So that's something that I learned after. But so there's those opportunities. Veterinary Public Health Club is at the vet school. I'm actually the president-elect for that club. And we bring in speakers, and we actually have a vaccination clinic at the YMCA this semester. And do a wellness week and have other things going on. So there's that opportunity there. And then just in labs, like the lab that I'm working in kind of has kind of a public health. There's zoonotic bacteria that we're working with and stuff like that. So there's opportunities everywhere just because public health and One Health does encompass so much. And then we also have courses on public health. So this semester, second year, you'll get a public health course. And then our case studies course this semester is also focusing on like transboundary emerging diseases and stuff. So there are plenty of opportunities. But I'll let Kate talk about the MPH program here because she probably knows a lot more about that.
So it's interesting that you chose Minnesota. I'm learning new things. It's interesting that you chose Minnesota because you could start the semester or the summer before vet school. I actually did do that. So I had previously started my MPH at the University of Arizona, had applied to schools knowing that I wanted to continue that. And then when I committed to Iowa State, I reached out to the University of Iowa saying, is there any way that I could take some of the summer courses? And they said, oh yeah, it's not normal because it just isn't common, but you can. And there's really no rule saying you can't as long as you are an enrolled veterinary student. So one of the big pulls for the DVM MPH program through the University of Iowa, which is our like official partner program, is that it is the cheapest DVM MPH program in the country. I don't know what Katherine's runs, but I know that for us, when we take a class during the semester, I only pay $500 a class to the University of Iowa. And because of how FAFSA and federal loans work, great if you don't have loans, but for most of us, we do. You can't take out loans through multiple institutions at the same time. So you have to budget that in. And $500 a class is really reasonable when you think about $2,000 potentially, like if they were charging per unit. So we do get a discount. And then during the summer, when we do take some of our courses, we're eligible to take out our loans through the University of Iowa, which is kind of nice. So I think in total, my program cost me $14,000, and most of that comes from the summer tuition. So if you choose to take more classes during the semester, you can offset some of that cost. I personally knew that I did not want to overwhelm myself because they are full graduate courses, but some people will choose to do 2 or 3 rather than doing like 1 a semester. So I've taken an additional 1 3-unit course since, I mean, before school started, but pretty much every semester. And then I'm set to graduate actually this spring. I intentionally did not want to do my MPH practicum during my 4th year. I wanted more time to go visit places. And so I did my practicum over the summer rather than doing like summer scholars or something like that. I intentionally looked for an opportunity so that I could do my 200 hours there. So that's about it, I think.
That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that wisdom about the MPH program and opportunities. So question here about establishing residency. And panelists jump in if you want. I can say in a nutshell, the best place to look for information on that is with the Iowa State Registrar. So I'll put up a link to their information in just a second. Typically, it takes 1 year in the state of Iowa where school is not your main priority. So you're working part-time or more, I should say more than part-time, and you have to take, I believe it's 5 or 6 or fewer classes. So typically, if you start as a veterinary student, as an as a veterinary student, as an out-of-state student, you will be an out-of-state student all 4 years. Your situation might be unique, so definitely reach out to the registrar. But Kate, did you want to add?
Yeah, and not every school is like that. There are schools like Washington and others across the country that after a year or so you can apply and get residency tuition. I do know of people who, based off of their parents or based off of their spouses working, like those were avenues that they explored and they were granted in-state tuition. So if you have an opportunity to do so, I highly recommend it. That was not the case for me, but there are those circumstances that it can happen. I just wouldn't bet on it. It's definitely not a guarantee, but you can at least explore your options.
I'm actually one of those that my parents moved back to Iowa. And so due to that, and we could prove that we cut ties with the previous state and that we moved for my father's job, that I was able to get in-state tuition because at that time I was still a dependent. And so I paid 1 semester out of state and then the rest have been in-state tuition for me.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I did put the link in the for the registrar in the chat. So if you do have specific questions about, if your situation is unique, absolutely go to the registrar. There's contact information for them as well. So question about scholarships. So first, when will we find out about scholarships if we've been awarded for incoming first year students? Those honestly happen usually right around this time within the next 2 to 3 weeks. However, based on how many students are turn down their offer of admission and maybe a scholarship, it could come later. So I would say probably by the summer you would know specifically, but it should be here pretty soon. You're right, scholarships would absolutely should be a factor. Finances are definitely a factor when you get ready to choose your veterinary school, especially as an out-of-state student. Absolutely. The benefit is that there are other places for scholarships. So that's where I'm going to stop talking and let our experts talk a little bit more about scholarships.
Yeah, so I received my notification that I got a scholarship after I had already accepted my offer here at Iowa State. And I waited basically until the last minute to accept. So I want to say that was in April-ish. They are really good about trying to get as many people scholarships as possible. And I think that they're trying to, I don't want to say it wrong, but like double what we've been doing. So there's only going to be more opportunities for it. So I think that Iowa State is really, really good about that and trying to give that money back to the students and recognizing like how much of a financial toll it can be. So.
Yeah, when I was notified of my acceptance here, I had already known that I wanted to come here, but I was accepted at another school and I went and visited that school. Regardless of when you're offered acceptance from a particular school, you still have until that April 15th deadline. No one can like force you to make a decision sooner than that. It is a big no-no at a federal level. So I was waiting to kind of see if that would play out. And actually, while I was visiting the other school, I got a call from Iowa State with my scholarship offer. And I was like, that's great. I'll see you in August. So I kind of decided at a different school that I was going to come here. But I was anticipating that and sort of waiting to see, because that is such a huge pull here. And as an out-of-state student, I wanted to see what either school potentially was going to offer me before making that commitment. It's up to you. If you're an in-state student, regardless if you get a scholarship or not, you're probably not going to find something cheaper. So if that's the factor you're waiting for, like it might not make a huge difference like in the long run for your debt, because some of them are offered, at lower values to in-state versus out-of-state, but it kind of depends on the situation. So I would recommend that if money is a big deal for you, you can always wait. You can always ask the schools when their offers come out. But I think I found out like 2 weeks after the February 15th deadline for here. But I do know of people who were notified in the summer based off of just applicants turning down, or even saying, oh, just kidding, sorry, I was pulled off the wait list for my in-state school. Like, things do change over time. So nothing's set in stone until you're at that school. So.
Great. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about scholarships once you're in vet school? What does that process look like for you all?
I guess I can. So I have a renewable scholarship that the one that I was offered, but I have also applied for other ones and received other ones. So you can apply to Iowa State's One App program, and there's things outside of the vet school. You can also apply to the American Veterinary Medical Foundation. You can apply through AVMA. You can apply through the Iowa Veterinary Medical Association, or if you belong to your state's VMA, they might have scholarships. Or if you're really interested in exotics, or if you're really interested in zoo, like there's a lot of different specific scholarships depending on what you're looking for, and they're for different things. The other thing you can do is you can find a job that gives you a scholarship. So one of my many things that I do in my not spare time is I'm the Graduate and Professional Student Senate information officer, which essentially means I do the website and social media and like take attendance, but I get $1,200 a year for it. So like I ran for the position, like I knew that that's what I wanted, but I also knew that that like would be a scholarship. So that I don't get a paycheck from them. They literally just put it on my U-bill. So it does actually reduce the debt I take out. So that's also something to consider, is like if you have positions that will directly pay your bill, that's technically a scholarship as well. I've also been awarded things externally, and that's usually just because I've kept track of deadlines or things were announced through our listservs and whatnot. So there's a lot of different options. It would be silly to say that there's not options once you're in vet school to get scholarships, because there are plenty of them out there if you're searching for them.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think this is a great question that I would like each of you to answer, because I think that what does a typical day look like for a vet student changes a lot from year to year, and probably from day to day for you all too. So let's just kind of go in order of the years. Connor, do you want to tackle that first? What does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so obviously with COVID, it's very different. So kind of simply put, all of our labs are still in person, but in a lot smaller groups. So instead of being in an anatomy lab for 4 hours, half of us will be in for the first 2 hours, and the other half will be in for the next 2 hours. And then all of our lectures are really online, so just recorded stuff that's posted, and then all of our discussions and stuff are done over Zoom. So it's very atypical compared to what I was expecting. And then two things changed, like just this past week, we had actually class canceled on Monday and Tuesday because it was so cold here. So we're very used to going with the flow. And I would say the biggest things is, yeah, just you got to put in effort, especially with COVID, to actually get into the school. So I do every wet lab and stuff like that through the clubs that come up, just to make sure that I'm still getting my hands on animals and doing that stuff that keeps it fun.
Yeah, so I can talk so pre-COVID, my first year, well, most of my first year, we typically come in the school. First classes are usually around 8 o'clock. It typically goes to around 3 or so. You're pretty much in class all day. It's basic lecture hall, large lecture halls with your class. Labs are in person, that kind of thing. Your first year, you're gonna have anatomy lab. You're gonna have micro lab, or not micro, sorry, histo lab, just different things in person. So you're getting a lot of hands-on. I don't know when that's coming back with COVID. One thing that I really appreciate about Iowa State, and something that I've kind of talking to my friends that are at other schools hasn't been exactly the same, is how much we do get to do in person. Even last semester, being able to have labs in person and exams in person was a real priority, and something that they really fought for us. And I really appreciate, because exams online was really tough. And just the logistics of all of it, and having it just a quiet space to be able to take it, and just, it was so much more stressful. So having exams in person has been great. Last semester, we even had like all of our labs in person. Some of them have been shortened a little bit, but they are still doing everything they can to make sure we're getting all the opportunities we should be getting, all the experiences we should be getting to like prepare us to be a veterinarian. And now I know a lot of my classmates have kind of just like really run with the online lectures, but they are giving us the opportunity for anyone now in our class anyway who wants to be in person for lectures. They've set it up so we just sign up for seats. So I am going into lectures in person typically like once every at least like 4 days of the week. So it has been more in person. I'm assuming that's gonna, hopefully, fingers crossed, gonna keep coming back. But yeah, it's just a lot of studying, and then you get home and you study a lot. And but the nice thing is it's so focused at this point, and this is what you've been working for, and this is what you're really wanting to do at this point. So it's all very interesting and all really worth it. I mean, it sounds like a lot going into it, and it is, but it's all great. Like, I like studying, so I think it's really neat.
Yeah, and just kind of the tag on too is I should say that I do still go into class every day except for Wednesdays. So Wednesdays I'm 100% online. That's when, at least for VM1s, all of our discussions and kind of like our 1 semester hour lecture classes are. But then Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I do go in for several hours for lab. So it's not like I'm taking an online class or, online school or anything.
For third years last semester, I felt like we were a lot more in person than some of the other classes, just because we had patient care still. So even though, second years this semester will start to do surgeries. Their first year, you actually do like clinical skills and exams, but fall of your third year, you start doing surgeries. And so that patient care can be anywhere from 4 to 5-ish days. It depends on like the class, or like when you overlap, and we transferred to different groups. And so they've made a little bit more modifications. But last semester I was at school almost every day because of patient care. Now this semester, if you want to continue doing surgery, because we actually as a school and as students get a lot of surgical experience in comparison to other schools. If you want to continue that, there are surgical electives. So right now I'm in an elective where I have patient care at least 3 days a week. And then I also have labs on other days. So I'm probably about in person 3 or 4 just with COVID. Third year becomes a lot more integrative medicine style courses rather than the ologies, histology, pathology, micro, etc. And so you kind of start to feel like a baby doctor. I think, at least for me, that's how it has sort of felt like as we're ramping up to fourth year. And it becomes a lot more, in my opinion, manageable, because you're taking all of the different courses you've been looking at individually and sort of creating a composite photo. And that's like what medicine is it's not just looking at one particular facet. So I've actually quite enjoyed third year. And then the spring of your third year, they actually drop your units quite a bit from your 19 to 20-ish plus to 16 as your core, and then you can take electives. So I started taking my electives in like the spring of my first year because I just like to take classes for fun. But in the spring of your third year, there's a lot of VM3 only courses like exotic animal medicine or introduction to small ruminant medicine. And again, those are more of that integrated style of course that you really probably wouldn't get until you're at this point. But you can take other things along the way that'll help, because you do have a 4-unit of electives requirement at a 400 level before you go into 4th year. And so that's a pretty easy way to do it. So I have felt that 3rd year kind of eases you into what you would consider maybe more normal or like undergrad right before ramping it up for 52 weeks of rotations. I'm sure Dakota can testify to that. They make you get real comfortable and then they let you be free. So I've actually enjoyed this semester. I feel like it's reasonable even with the patient care, but a lot more of it is focusing on caring for actual animals as well as balancing those courses, which just don't have the larger lab components as like 1st or 2nd year, in my opinion.
And 4th year. 4th year varies every rotation and honestly every day. I'm currently on anesthesia, so we have to be in the hospital by 7 a.m. prepared to anesthetize our patients for the day. And we are there until 5 o'clock or our last patient is done, and we are on call. So on-call schedule gets split up between your rotation mates. There's other on-call rotations depending on the rotation, whether you're in the ICU or you're on call for surgery. Surgery on call is for anesthesia and regular surgeries, whether it's small animal or equine, or I guess large or ruminant surgery, but that's not usually an emergency. So that stuff goes overnight. I've had rotations where I go in at 8 and I'm home at 3. I've had rotations where I have patient care for inpatients and I'm home, or I leave home at 6:30. I'm in the hospital by 6:45 and I don't get home until 9:30. Just because of patient care, you have to do your 8s and 8s. And so 8s aren't 8s, they are 7:30 by the latest, usually. Just because clinicians have multiple patients to see and everybody needs to have their treatments done. I really enjoy 4th year. I can tell you my grades show it. I get way more out of it. I love the hands-on, love getting to be the baby doctor, and get to actually make the decisions for my patients and just learning so much more and putting all of that 1st, 2nd, 3rd year knowledge into actual use. And our clinicians are really good about letting us at least come up with a treatment plan to begin with and go from there, and quizzing you at the same time and going, okay, why are you doing that? And why do you want that test run and that kind of thing? Every clinician's different, every service is different. So it's almost like changing jobs every 2 weeks, because you finally get comfortable on one rotation, say you're on dermatology, and then the next rotation you're on surgery. And so they have totally different hours, totally different expectations, totally different things, but at the same time, you might have a surgery patient that has a dermatologic condition, so you have to be able to treat both. So again, more of that integration of both, and I've really, really enjoyed 4th year, even if some of the hours are longer hours. Like Kate said, you kind of get, to slack off a little bit your spring semester of 3rd year, but at the same time, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a break before you hit 4th year. So.
Great, thank you all. So I have another question for each one of you, and that is, why did you choose Iowa State?
Yeah, for me, that's really easy. They were the only one who offered me a position, so I didn't have any other choice, and I was really excited to go. Really, it was my top choice anyway, because I lived in Iowa, so that makes it by far, the price saved me $250,000 when it's all said and done. It's crazy how much cheaper it is. So, and then being close to family is nice too. So family and the cost effectiveness is definitely the 2 big things for me.
Yeah, so I did have offers from a couple other schools. I chose Iowa State. Cost was a factor, but also I actually had considered Iowa State for undergrad as well. My family kind of did a whole college road trip thing where we looked at a bunch of schools, and I just loved Iowa State. I ended up going to Purdue just because it was a little closer. It was a little far from Ohio for my undergrad experience. But when I came back, I had the exact same feeling that I had in undergrad. I came to one of the tours when they were in person and just loved it. All the professors and faculty and staff and students are all so involved and passionate about teaching, and other students and everyone's just so friendly. I mean, it sounds really but I mean, like just the feeling that I got here was basically the big thing for me. I've always been that kind of person that, like, if I don't feel great at a place, I'm not going to enjoy myself and do the best that I can. And I definitely get that here. I've not had a bad professor since I've been here. They're all so invested in what they're doing and in the students. And so that makes us really invested in what they're doing. And I think it's just like, that's just been awesome. So no horror stories about any professors. They're all great. All the classes have been awesome up to this point. And that was the biggest thing for me. I just, like, everyone I met was better than next. So.
I had applied to 5 schools with the intent of having like a really lengthy backup list because, again, I was out of state at the time, so there was no like, oh well, maybe next year I can get in state. And so I got into here in one other school, and at the time, actually, the base tuition was cheaper at the other school, and that was great, except for the cost of living was like 3 times what it is here, so it really didn't even out at the end of the day. The health insurance coverage, I actually prioritize like mental health coverage. We have one of the best like mental health coverage student insurances in the country. It's like 100% covered. There's no deductible for it. And so part of it was health insurance. And then when I was offered my scholarship, it was kind of like cherry on top, but there were other things that like led me to want to be at Iowa State. The other thing that played a big role for me, not realizing that I could maybe look at Minnesota as a dual degree option, but the other school had a dual degree program, but I would have to take a year off in between my second and third year to do my master's of public health in a year, even though I had like 29 units under my belt. And so like our DVM PhD program does that because they'll do all of their research during that year. And that is like a pretty condensed program. But for me, I was like, really, you're going to make me take off a year for a 2-year master's that I've already essentially completed half of. So I was already a little hesitant about that. If I had only gotten accepted at that school and they had offered it to me first, I might have gone there, but not done my MPH. And so kind of like a bunch of different things altogether. But for me, money was a huge priority. I'm financially independent. I, at the time, had someone living with me when I came here, and then we broke up. And so then I didn't have someone living with me. And so I didn't anticipate that happening, but for me, it was like the financial security long term, anyways, was already a priority. And I have no idea what would have happened if I would have been at that school and that would have happened. So for me, I looked at money and health insurance as along with like tuition because I didn't really get to pick like in state versus out of state. So it depends on your situation, I guess.
And for me, I had Minnesota as a wait list. I was also accepted at Missouri. Minnesota at the time was my in-state. I chose Iowa. I kind of had fallen in love with it during a visit during high school and kind of knew Iowa State was the place I wanted to go. It was my number one when I applied. And it kind of came down to my family's in Northeast Iowa. I'm 3.5 hours from my nieces and nephew. So family, and then my parents being able to move back. So finances. And then just because Iowa State was my favorite overall, especially when I came to visit both times, actually 3 times, 2 times right in a row when I brought my pre-vet club down. So I knew Iowa State was the right fit for me just because of that. And coming from a small school, it still had a little bit, I had that family atmosphere that I had come from. My undergrad, we had an average class size of 18 students. So coming to a larger school, I was a little worried about that, but the family atmosphere definitely is what helped that decision as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, lots of different factors that go into that vet school decision. Okay, so we have a question here. Can you speak to how LGBT plus friendly the university and surrounding area are?
Can I please take this?
Yes.
Excellent. So my class is actually responsible for reigniting the CVM Spectrum Club, and they are now an approved Pride Student Veterinary Medical Community chapter. So they receive funding now from the national organization, but it was not previously a thing. There's actually other clubs on main campus, even for graduate students, that we're involved in. Iowa State itself has it's called the Center, and it's essentially an LGBTQIA plus center. It's an actual space in the Memorial Union. It's awesome and amazing, and I love going there when it's not COVID, but it's definitely a really good resource. When it comes to like Ames as a whole, it's really sad. Like, for those of you who are of age, like there's no gay bars in town. That's actually been something that people have complained about for like a decade plus, which is really interesting. There are several in Des Moines, so like a 30-minute drive, but I would say that Ames is pretty accepting. I think a lot more of the social justice issues in town have to do with race. It's very homogenous. Even this panel here, all of us are white functioning. And so I do think that, if you're part of the community, you will find people. We have club events now all year round. We do things with the national organization. And because of our sort of passion, we now have executive officers on Pride, Veterinary Medical Center's national board and whatnot. So there's a lot of different options. We have been pushing the past year and a half for more diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, which includes things like pronouns on our name tags, pronouns in our email headers, pronouns in our Zooms when we do simulated client experiences. And that like little things to make it a more inclusive environment. And so I definitely feel like if you are part of the community and you are seeking people to just find that with, you will find it here. It might not be as big as like another larger university that might be in a different area, but I personally have felt very at home within the community. And if anyone needs personal resources or has like very specific questions, you can email me personally. I know that that might not be something you want to ask in a forum, but I would say that it's a really good environment for people in the LGBTQIA community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, just to echo that, I know that first years coming in, I shouldn't say I know, I'm pretty sure that first years coming in now get diversity training. And that was something that was given out as an option for current students to take over winter break. So I did participate in that, and there was a lot of interest in it. It seems like our community is really open to learning and improving and everything. And I mean, it's felt very inclusive, and the efforts have been really impressive, especially over the last since I've been here. So yeah, there's also a club on campus, Voice, that has kind of been up and coming. They kind of like got restarted, I want to say the last like 6 months or so. But it's Veterinarians with One Inclusive Community for Empowerment, and it's a national organization, but they have started getting really involved here on campus, and people have been really receptive to that. So
we're also starting, I know that there's interest in a Latinx VMA chapter. I know that there's a couple different people who participate in the Multicultural Veterinary Medical Association, which is a meeting I had earlier today. I think it's the Asian Veterinary Medical Association, Black DVM Network. There's a lot of different integrated events, and we try to do webinars for like the whole school too. So even if you're not a part of those particular clubs, you might still have access to things. But definitely within the past 2-3 years, Iowa State has been pushing heavily to do more of the work. And so part of it was, they were encouraged by student leaders to do it, but they've really stepped up. We have diversity book clubs. We have really good resources for staff and faculty. They also pay for some of us to do the Purdue Diversity and Inclusion Excellence Training through Purdue, which I know Katherine is from, so she might be more familiar with that program. But there are a lot of great options here for different people from different backgrounds and intersectional identities.
Yeah, and then two, there is also one more called OSTEM. So that's like out in science and technology, engineering and math. So that, there is definitely a lot of those type of communities, but it is great to have the Spectrum Club that's, specific to the veterinary school. So, you have that niche group that, you can relate with, and it's kind of a safe space. And I've never felt uncomfortable, here at Iowa State. So
Thank you. I really appreciate you all kind of sharing your wisdom, not just for our folks that are LGBTQIA plus, but also for those folks who maybe don't present as white, like you're right, Kate, this panel does. Question here, and you might know, being, in your roles with student leaders, if there have been rumblings about what classes might look like this fall. I know, from the things that I've heard, it's a big question mark because it's hard to tell what things will look like this summer, let alone this fall. But Kate, I see you're off mute. Do you want to kind of chime in?
So part of the graduate, goodbye. Sorry, my cat's a blood donor and he's a little drunk, so I'm very sorry. But anyways, so part of the Graduate Professional Student Senate is the president and vice president sit in on Board of Regents and provost meetings, and they participate in the staff and administration faculty, or the staff and faculty senate, I think is what it's called. So one thing that you'll learn is, as a land grant university, there's a lot of bureaucracy in it. And so the Board of Regents, since the beginning of COVID, has wanted in-person classes. And pretty much it took the Iowa Department of Public Health and the CDC saying, that's probably not the safest option, for them to sort of say, fine, we'll try, like, we'll do this integrated thing. So they really want in person. They are stressing that as much as possible. So I think that that goal is going to stay the same. I think that they are going to push for in person as much as possible. But I feel like, compared to last semester, they've had a lot more time to plan and prepare for things. I feel like all of us have different options. I mean, fourth year, yes, you are there in person. You're not doing most things virtually, but for all of us, we have different ways to mitigate risk. Like, we have assigned professional learning groups, and like my class personally, some of us will be in class at a certain time while some of us will use Zoom. So they try to make it even if we can't all be in the same class at the same time, so that if you do really well in person, you have that opportunity. And so I think that as we go through this process, even if it's still the same, they'll just get better at being able to mitigate that risk while also having the time to plan it. But long term, the higher ups that be want us all in person. So that's probably where it's going to be pushing towards.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, so question here is, I currently attend a very small school with a typical class size of 20 students. So what are some challenges? And Dakota, I see you shaking your head because I know you went to a smaller school, a smaller undergrad. So what were some of the challenges as you made that transition, and other folks can join in too? So yeah, what was that transition like from small class to a larger class?
So I actually graduated from a larger high school than my undergrad. So I kind of had a little weird transition there. But coming back to a larger school, I mean, it was just a large class size, and then you just kind of have to learn how to approach your faculty members. I mean, my undergrad, I had my faculty members cell phone numbers. We call it, it was all first name basis. It was all very, very personal. Just kind of due to an animal science, you have to take care of the animals, so you kind of need their numbers in case of a calving or something. But anyway, for me, first semester was the biggest transition. I think the histophys class in particular is the one that got me the most. And so just learning how to study for that was my biggest struggle versus the class size. The class size wasn't usually my issue because not everybody always shows up to class. We have asynchronous echo. So you can, if you're sick, stay home, or if you learn better at home, you can stay home. For me, I need to be in person, and I had to figure out how to study, and then being able to approach your faculty members and say, hey, I'm struggling with this concept. Can you help me? This is what I have tried. We do have tutors if you are struggling. And so I'll be honest, I got a tutor for one of my classes because I just wasn't quite getting it. And it definitely helped. And then, later on, it definitely was seen that it came back to help, that I had a smaller class size. You know how to interact with people. on a more personal level, I feel like, with having a smaller class and then coming to a larger class, but it wasn't too much of a struggle class size for me.
Yeah, I went to a larger university, obviously Purdue's pretty big, but I was in the College of Agriculture. We had a lot of very small classes. And I would say, so I did like the on-campus, like chemistry and biology and that kind of stuff with larger lectures, and then the smaller like ag classes. And I would say that classes here are definitely more comparable as far as feel and relationship with the professors and um, just overall comfort. I feel like it's a lot closer to my ag classes, just because a big difference is you are in the same seat, basically. Usually they're not assigned seats. I mean, now they are, but they weren't. But every day with the same people, and like you get to know your classmates really well. You get to know your professors really well. It's amazing. Dr. Brown is one of our professors here, and she'll know your name by like the end of the first week. Somehow she knew my name before I even introduced myself. So she then they're all like that. Like they're all of the professors make a real effort to have a personal relationship with every student. So COVID has made that kind of difficult, and that's kind of sad. Some online stuff, but even in review sessions, I know professors will be introducing themselves, or some have reached out to me during email if like they have a question about my exam, or like they're still very, very much involved in our education. So I can imagine it is difficult coming from a smaller school and having smaller class sizes, but I don't think the class size really has too much of an effect on students' learning experience, from what I've been told and from my own experience.
I would echo that sentiment, just because there are schools that have smaller class sizes, and there's always a concern like, is that compromising your education? And I really haven't felt that. Coming from Southern California, I went from a larger town to a smaller town actually, and so this was great because it was more tight knit, even though I came from a larger town, because of how your cohort is. Like, you know everyone just because you're going through all the same classes, and you do usually sit in the same seat normally. But I feel like the instructors know you on a more personal level, even if there are over 100 of you. I personally wasn't diagnosed with like ADHD and all the other things I have going on in my life until I got to vet school, and it was only because an instructor was like, "Hey, have you thought about going through this process?" And I was like, "No, I haven't. I have somehow survived this far." He's like, "Well, I would just explore it." And it, like, they didn't really know me. Like, I'm one of 157 in my personal class, but because of their suggestion, like, I did go through that process. And so I was very surprised. I probably wouldn't have pegged this person as someone who knew me, or like would have made that recommendation. And they still cared about me though as an individual. So I definitely don't feel like I'm a number. I do feel like I'm still treated as an individual, regardless of where I'm at in my curriculum. So
And one more thing I forgot to say, one way I've started to look at it too is like, we're all going to be professionals in this field at some point. So that's just more like colleagues that you're kind of getting to know earlier on, and more contacts you're going to have in the future as you're going forward. So that's, it was a little like daunting. It is one of the largest vet classes, but I kind of see that as a plus now, especially after experiencing it and not really feeling any negative effects from it.
Yeah, and I was kind of in this, I went from a large school to a small. I graduated with like over 430 kids in my degree in my class. So this is actually a lot smaller than I was used to. And I would say it doesn't feel that way though. Like, one big thing is that you have the same professors for multiple classes. So like Dr. Rowe was our main physiology professor first semester, and now he's our main anatomy professor. So you definitely can build those connections with the professors, even though it's a big class. But you do still have to kind of make an effort. If you, like, for me, I was struggling in anatomy, so I had to get a tutor, and I had to go in after hours and put in that extra work. It's definitely not, no one's going to be babysitting you, so to speak, but definitely they do care.
Great, thank you for that. So Connor, I've got a couple of questions here that are for you in the chat, which was how do you balance vet school life with your family, and then also how do you balance what does childcare look like in Ames? So, and then if anybody else wants to join in with their insights on balancing, family time with vet school, that would be great too.
Yeah, so it is hard. I mean, I am under more stress now than I've ever been in my life. I'm not going to lie about that. I do go to therapy. That's one thing I always like to mention in these things is that you should be aware of your mental health, and it is very, very draining at times, especially with I work in an emergency clinic, so we do see a lot of bad stuff. So definitely taking care of yourself is important, and then also just like I mentioned earlier, is setting realistic expectations. Like, I'm not going to get a 4.0. I know that. Like, I'd rather be there for my family and my daughter instead of, worrying about getting perfect grades. And then two, it is important to try and find some sort of support system. So I am married. So of course my wife can watch Marley, my daughter, when I have exams and stuff like that, need to study. And my parents live just an hour away. So they're a huge help too, just stopping in for a weekend and giving me time to study. But definitely just I can't take too much time off, like even if it's just playing a lecture in the background while I'm hanging out with her, stuff like that. And then sorry, for daycare too, so there's a daycare attached to the vet school, so that's really convenient too. I just drop her off there every morning before my classes and pick her up afterwards. I will say it's extremely expensive. It's more expensive than my mortgage to take her there, so I think it's like $1,400 a month. So that's a very big, scary number, but they do an amazing job there. And there are, of course, like at-home daycare options that are a lot cheaper, but we kind of figured we don't want to skimp on our daughter, so we're willing to put that money in.
Also, main campus doesn't even have daycare, so we are a little spoiled in that for anyone who is a parent. And Connor's definitely not the only one, but that's not even main campus has that. That's something they've been pushing for a while.
Yes, and I believe you can get more student loans, and not that student loans are always the answer, but for vet school they are a reality. And that childcare can be factored into that too. So
Yeah,
great.
to our daycare actually, it's a tiered system, so you actually pay like a certain percentage of your income. So because we have a combined income with my wife, we're in that highest tier. So if you're just living by yourself and you're working part-time, you're going to pay a lot less than that too.
Good to know. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Can we talk a little bit about research? So this question says, are there many research opportunities for vet students, especially with small animals? There's a lot of large animal stuff, but wondering about small animals as well.
There are so many opportunities for small animal stuff. There's a lot. And you can work in the hospital, you can do it yourself. There's clubs, I personally, my biggest qualm with the program is our lack of exotics, which when I came in, we had an exotics program, but we now no longer do. So if you're just looking for like small animal dogs and cats, we got you. If you're like chinchillas only, might want to go find someone who like does it in the community. But I personally have had no issue coming from a small animal or mixed animal background finding those opportunities. So I would not be worried again, unless you're like only zoo, only wildlife, only exotics.
Yeah, we have a summer scholars program for students, and it's something, I think applications just closed this weekend actually, but it's something that a lot of students participate in. And I know that one of my classmates actually, she just posted on Facebook about, she just got her first publication done. And that was, I believe hers, she's a horse person, so it was like, it has to do with horses, but there's plenty with small animals. I know my other friend was applying, and some of the things he applied to was like cardiology with dogs, and then there was another one, a dermatology one or something like that. And then the research that I'm in is specifically surveillance at the small animal hospital and the large animal hospital, but also the small animal hospital, looking for like MRSA and MRSP, ESBL organisms, CRE organisms, stuff like that, that could be potentially problematic for the people that are working in the hospital, but also the small animals. So, and most of it's coming from the animals. So there are plenty of opportunities for research. I know someone's working on C. diff and dogs that visit hospitals and stuff like that. So there's tons and tons of stuff. I mean, there's always opportunities. And if you hear a professor talking about, a lot of the people that are doing this research are the professors that you're going to have. So if you hear someone talking about a subject that you like in class, I would definitely approach them about it. Odds are if they're not doing some kind of research that you can shadow on or work in, they'll know somebody who's got something that'll interest you. So there are tons of opportunities, so many opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo Catherine in that my job actually came from an application for trying to, help with research. And I worked as a paper editor for one of our previous ophthalmologists, and which was a very low stress, low time commitment job. But doing the research, I mean, you can honestly, if you have an interest, say in ophthalmology or theorio or dermatology, you can go down to the clinic and just talk to the clinicians. They are so excited to find somebody who wants to help with research and has the time and willingness to help with research that they'll find a project. They all have tons of ideas, especially dermatology. With our new dermatologist, he's got lots of ideas that you can find plenty of research opportunities, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through the summer scholars program either. So lots of options.
Yeah, I pretty much went to my boss in the veterinary diagnostic lab and was like, I really want to get involved in a project. Who's doing the project? And she's like, I don't know. So she sent out an email to the department and was like, who wants a body to help us? And like that was kind of just how I got involved in research, because I didn't come in with a particular idea. So I like it when people are like, oh my gosh, look at all these things I can do. But on the flip side of that, if you don't know where to ask those questions, you can just email instructors and staff and faculty, and they will find you somewhere, even if it's not summer scholars.
Great, fantastic. So question here about internships and residencies. So I don't know that we're going to have the exact stats on it, but I'd like to hear from the students, kind of what you hear from your peers or what your experience here. So how many students are heading off to internships and residencies to specialize after graduation? I think the actual stat is about 10 to 15%. But anybody, Dakota, do you want to kind of talk about your classmates?
From what I've heard from classmates personally not doing it, did not have the grades for it, or the willingness to be poor for longer. But I think about 10 to 15% of our class is going into internships. A lot of them planning to specialize after, not just to do it, just to learn more and get more experience. It's more so to definitely specialize. A lot of them internal medicine, a lot on surgery, a couple radiology, which would be really awesome because we need more radiologists in our life. But I think it really varies, A, by class, B, by interests. And I feel like there's a lot more people, and one of our clinicians last week said that more of our students should be going into those internships and residencies because they can make it. And he kind of wanted to see more people actually go. So he thinks that Iowa State can produce more internships and residents. So if you're interested in it, go for it.
As someone who is prepping for the match and residency programs right now, and also other things. So my long-term goals involve being in academia, actually. So I'm also going to be applying to PhD programs because I just want to be in a school. So the match is great for those internships, but not every specialty requires it. Pathology being one of them. So clinical pathology does prefer either practice or a rotating internship, but actually anatomic pathology prefers you fresh out of vet school, which I thought was really interesting. And I learned that at a conference. And so it kind of just depends on what your interests are and whether like long term you want to specialize, and you're probably planning on doing the match program, which is essentially a ranking system that you rank where you want to go and they rank you as an applicant. But that's not going to be what everyone wants to do or has time or energy for, because you don't get paid as much as like going straight out into practice, and you might not want the hours that offers. So it does depend. I think from my class is like very geared up for internships for whatever reason. I don't know if we're going to see a spike from that 10 to 15% with my class, but a lot of people I'm talking to are interested in that internship, and many of them just to get that experience. people describe it as getting 5 years of experience in a single year just for a small animal rotating internship. So if you can imagine the work associated with cramming 5 years of your life into 1 year, like it's just a lot of work. So it's not for everyone, but I do feel that a lot of people in my class are very interested in that. And it is its own process. It's kind of like when you apply to vet school, you start in May and you end in the fall and you hope for the best, but if that's what you want, it's worth it.
And I kind of see in the chat, there's one specifically about internships with neurology and having an interest in neurology and experience with neurology. I'm not sure about internships, just because I'm sure there is, I just don't have the information on it. But we do have a specific neurology class, which is something that I really enjoyed and didn't realize until talking to my friends that are vet students at other schools, that not everyone has. So we do have a whole class dedicated to neurology, which I think is really cool and is one of my favorite classes. So we'll have Dr. Greenlee here, and I recommend that if you're interested in neurology and getting more experience in that area, she would love to talk to you. She's so friendly. So, but yeah, there are opportunities here.
And even if we don't have a department, like I know Dakota made a joke about radiology, and like across the nation, there's a radiology shortage. It's not just us, but we are like working to staff that department. We don't have a neurology department, but I personally know, because I've worked with Wisconsin, they will take externs and fourth years from other schools. So like and I am doing this, I'm really interested in lab animal medicine just from the research standpoint. And I can do, an externship here, but I also said, hey, Michigan, do you have a spot for me? So if I was really interested in neurology, I could contact a department at another veterinary school and say, hey, do you have time, COVID aside, to take an out of state or someone not affiliated with your institution? And most of them say yes. I've never been told no, except for in cases where they have it already booked up or because of COVID. So if you want something, you can find it, whether it's here or in one of our partner organizations. Like the opportunities are endless. I wouldn't restrict yourself just because it's not like right in front of you.
My gosh, you would think I would be a professional now about this and not start talking before I unmute myself. So I know that we want to wrap up here. So I'm hoping that we can answer this question about activities and hobbies outside of school. So if you want to share kind of maybe the things you do to unwind or to step away from Iowa State every once in a while, that would be great. And then we'll wrap up with the last question, and I'm going to give you some time to think about it, because I'd like each one of you to answer your advice that you wish you knew or that someone told you coming into your first year of vet school. So we'll tackle getting involved first, but I want you to be thinking about that that question about, what piece of advice would you have wanted to hear, or what piece of advice did you hear coming into vet school? But first, let's talk a little bit about those things outside of class and outside of vet school that you do that you're excited about. There you go. Okay. Kate, do you want to start?
Sure, that's fine. I was not playing earlier. Obviously, I was studying. So yeah, I am a gamer. I have an Xbox. I'm also a PC gamer. I actually schedule breaks, which like it's very hard for me to take a break, so I have to do that. I also am a golfer. Not right now, but like when the weather is permitting, I do go outside occasionally. Pre-COVID, I was going to the gym on main campus because I really enjoyed that. It's a little bit larger than what we have at the CVM. And so, yeah, golf, video games. I do like art, wood burning, stuff like that. And I put that in my schedule. Like I need to take me time because I, like Connor, I do have a therapist as well, and I go to therapy either weekly or monthly. But I also want to make sure that I'm taking time to like take care of myself, whether that's sitting on my couch and playing video games or watching Netflix. I try to have a pretty good work-life balance because otherwise you will not survive. That is the nice way of putting it. You will just burn out too quickly, and nobody wants to be burned out in vet school, so it's not worth it.
Yeah, for me, so I actually didn't work at all last semester. So this might not be the answer some of you are looking for, but I am working this semester, and it's honestly keeping me sane and like grounded in why I'm doing this. Like last semester, I felt like I was just drowning in this textbook information and kind of lost track of why I was doing it. So definitely just working that 1 day a week is nice because I actually get my hands into animals and, I don't have to worry about textbooks and stuff. And then another thing too is I make sure that every single week I have one night where I just don't focus on school for a few hours, and we usually have a movie night with the family. So before it got cold, I also like to disc golf. So just getting outside and doing things like that, even if it's just for an hour, I make sure to do something every single week. And that was advice that I got from like VM2s coming in, is that it's really good to plan at least one day where you're like, I'm going to relax on this day. And even if I have a bunch of exams the next week, I need that decompressing time.
Yeah, so my big stress relief for me here is my animals. Denali came up at like the perfect point, but I have 2 dogs and a cat here. And so I come home and hang out with them. They get me outside and that kind of thing. Honestly, a lot of my free time is also at the school, and it's not really on purpose. The school just gives us so many opportunities as far as like working out there. And I think with COVID it's kind of been transformed a little bit, but they do have like a small gym for us at school. So when it's cold outside, I tend to run outside when it's warm, but when it's cold outside, there are treadmills and weights in there and different exercises and yoga mats and that kind of thing. We also have RSR, which is recreation and sports. I can't remember the last word, but it's basically sports and like doing different things. They have online Pilates classes and yoga classes and all this kind of stuff. And so it's like kind of stuff where it's with people that you really enjoy. So like, why not do it through the school? But like Connor said too, my jobs, I'm like working at the ICU doesn't feel like I'm at school. It feels like something that I want to be doing. I'm really enjoying it. It's time where I'm just using my hands, and actually it's kind of fun to like he said, use your knowledge, kind of maybe hear something that you don't know about, so you want to go learn about it, or something that you're learning about in class right then. And so it like it like adds to your motivation to study. But yeah, it's also nice. It's just time that is away, and it doesn't feel as much like you're at school. So yeah, my jobs, the animals, and then hanging out with friends. I mean, all my classmates, I love my class. So just getting to know them even better and doing things with them. There are things in Ames that you can do. Hopefully COVID, all those restrictions and stuff go away soon. So Riemann Gardens is here. There's a lot of outdoor opportunities for hiking and stuff like that. We now have a disc golf course on campus, thanks to a couple of students in my class and the classes above and below me. And some of our professors have really made that a priority to have something fun to do right there at school too. That was a big thing with RSR too. We're having an Olympics here soon too with that and some other things. They just like, there are just so many things to do at school that I end up doing most of my free time things there. So yeah, sorry, most of it's at school.
For me, I've got, my parents raised labs, and so I actually had to put my girl down about a little over a year ago. But all of those kids back there are definitely part of my stress relief. I had 2 of those guys here last year as a 3rd year in the fall semester, which was just a little crazy because they were 12-week-old puppies. So that was a little crazy, but yet at the same time, it's a huge stress relief. I've never not had a dog, and so this last year has been a little odd for me personally, not having a dog here. Probably would have done a little bit better on some things if I would have, but never know what's gonna happen. And I like to cross stitch, so I'm kind of an old lady. I get picked on for it. But cross stitching, I can sit there and watch Netflix and I still feel like I'm being productive, but yet I'm having a stress relief at the same time. So currently have a big project working on, but not anywhere near what I could show you guys, but something that I definitely enjoy doing. And then I love to bake. I will admit I'm the bad influence in the trailer. I get picked on for it. I made cookies a couple weekends ago, and I think they're almost all gone. And I made like 14 dozen cookies. So but baking, cross stitching, and obviously pets are all a lot of our stress relief. So
Great, thank you. Okay, so it's time for the final question. I think we got through most of the questions on the Q&A. There's one about the waitlist rank, which I'll touch at right at the end. But now it's time for some advice. So whoever wants to start, we'll kind of go around. All of you can have an opportunity to give one piece of advice that you have for our hopefully future class of 2025.
Yeah, so I can go first. I already mentioned definitely picking a day or a night every week where you can kind of decompress. But as far as the actual content wise, one thing that I kind of learned from struggling a lot last semester is really to focus. Almost all your classes will give you like learning objectives. So really what I do now is I start with those and then fill in the details later. Whereas last semester I was trying to literally memorize everything, and that's just not possible. But you know, it's easier just to, the professors here are very good about guiding you to what's really important. And then if you really master those core objectives, then the details definitely fill in easier. So I've been doing a little bit better with that this semester.
So my best advice, I would say ask for help. If you need anything, don't try and do it all on your own. You have your classmates and your professors who are all very eager to help you. I know a bunch of study materials that I use come from my classmates. And I try to return the favor, share the things that I'm working on, because you really are. I mean, it's a team effort at this point. And everybody here wants to see you succeed. So definitely do that, and kind of take it easy on yourself too. Not to say that you shouldn't be working really hard, you should, but some things are kind of just out of your control and you just got to do the best you can. But it's really easy. I know a lot of people that get to this point are the kind of people who do. They are kind of hard on themselves, and I'm one of those people. But definitely that first year was a big adjustment to realizing that you got to just like work your hardest, and that's all you can do. So that's a big thing. And also, yeah, just, I know it's hard to hear advice and you don't really, it stinks because I wish I would have taken some of the advice that I had heard before. You kind of just have to learn it yourself too. But yeah, definitely keep that in mind.
Learn to say no. Like, learn to set boundaries for yourself, and don't think that you're a failure because of it. It's really healthy. And as Katherine brought up, like, we're such motivated individuals and we've already gotten so far, and like, we're not used to stopping. Whatever that looks like for us, but we have to say no. My therapist is like, you can't fill up your cup if like someone keeps poking holes in yours. And sometimes we poke our own holes because we just overwhelm ourselves, and then we try to do everything, and that's just not how life works. So you will feel guilty to set those boundaries, but at the end of the day, like, your mental health and your physical health will be grateful. There have been nights where I'm like, could I stay up till 4 a.m. studying for this exam? Absolutely. Should I go to bed? Yeah. And I do. And like, yes, I think Michaela mentioned, like, I failed exams. I have gotten a D, but I am so much more happy for those nights where I was like, I can't do this to myself. It's not sustainable. It's me saying no to myself, essentially, and to other people. If people want you to step up in leadership positions and you don't want to, say no. Don't push yourself into a situation that you're just going to be unhappy, because it's not worth it. It's already stressful enough. Don't stress yourself out more.
So of course, Katherine and Kate took my go-tos. I guess for me, find what you're passionate about. Like for me, obviously I grew up with all of the lab. Theory was one of my big passions. And so I kind of tried to get myself involved where I could, and just to kind of keep my little happiness there. I really enjoyed repro when we got to, with that was physiology, as well as getting to our repro class third year. Just find what you're passionate about it and go with it, and try to get yourself involved. Like I had said before, all the clinicians are super helpful and want to get even the underclassmen super involved where they can. And learning to say no is huge, not feeling guilty about it. So, and it's okay to say no to family as well. Parents, siblings, you know, it's okay to tell them no, prioritize yourself first. So
Great. Thank you so much. That is excellent advice all around. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that. So I want to thank our panelists. This is the really sad part is we don't get a round of applause for you, but I'm sure that they're, you know, the attendees are clapping from where they are, right? So thank you all for lending your wisdom and your expertise and your advice for these hopefully incoming students. If those of you who are joining us, if you want to connect with these students, some of them may put their contact information in the chat. You can email them directly. You can also email me and I can connect you with them as well. So definitely check out the chat. Looks like some folks are putting their information in there. A couple of announcements before we go. One is for those of you who are alternates, you'll know your number on March 22nd. So you do have to wait a little while just because that alternate list shifts a whole heck of a lot in the next few weeks. So definitely be patient there and we'll get those numbers to you when they're more realistic as well. So the other thing is that we are hosting preview days on March 20th and 27th. Those will be all online, but there will be student faculty panels. There will be a virtual tour of the college. You'll hear from our dean, Dr. Grooms, and all kinds of stuff there as well. So there are some kind of more learning opportunities coming up for you, and look for that emailed invitation tomorrow or Thursday with more information about how you sign up and all of that kind of stuff. So again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you panelists for taking the time out of your evening, and we will hopefully see all of you soon in person at some point, right? Thank you all very much. Thanks.